education for what? And is education only about literacy and numeracy skills, or is there a context and a reason for education beyond numeracy and literacy? Historically, this finds its place in a subject many years ago in school which used to be known as moral science, which was very construct or content based, constructs like truth and values and so on, which means even 30, 40 years ago, in the emerging pedagogies of that time, there was a thought that there was more to education than math and geography and history and English and so on, and this was education for life. But because the methodologies of moral science were very didactic, they shifted to something known as family life education in the more recent past, where the family became the context in which many issues play themselves out, such as relationships, negotiation, collaboration, exploitation, taking the family as a metaphor of the larger society. Then came this phenomenon of socially useful, productive work, and the shift was then to application. At which point of time in the history of humanity, there were issues like gender-based violence, issues of child abuse, the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and more demands started to be placed on the education system, because these are very important issues to transact with children, especially because there's really no culture of discourse between adults and children. And how do children therefore construct knowledge about people, about relationships, about power, about domination, about choices? And children are entitled to activities and processes that enable them to make informed and healthy choices about their lives. And that's where the life skills concept came in the World Health Organization and related UN agencies like the UNICEF proposed a life skills concept. And life skills are a set of 10 generic skills that all of us use on a day-to-day basis to deal with the challenges of life. These include decision making, problem solving, creative thinking, critical thinking, effective communication, interpersonal relationships, self-awareness, empathy, coping with stress, and coping with emotions. These 10 life skills operate in different contexts. So decision making in a gender context, decision making in a conflict, decision making in a peer pressure context. And in the school system, the relationship between life skills and context is completed, the triangulation is completed by the methods of teaching, and the shift is from didactic methods to experiential pedagogies. Specifically the use of theatre, the use of films, small group work, of art, and so on. And the focus here is on process-driven pedagogies, so that the spirit of inquiry is inculcated in children, and the classroom becomes a collaborative community where knowledge is generated, argued, discussed, debated, and refined, so that when children are actually placed in a situation of conflict or a difficult situation, they are able to make choices and decisions which, like I said, are more healthy and informed. So it's these experiential pedagogies that really form the bulwark and the scaffolding of how life skills programs are now carried out in schools. And this has now been mandated by the National Curriculum Framework that came from the NCERT. And many schools, many boards have actually embraced the concept of life skills, not as something which is extracurricular, but an integral part of education. When one interacts with children using these methodologies, one doesn't hope for outcomes and success. As a facilitator, my interaction with children is a process-oriented interaction. So I believe that in their emerging narrative as human beings, I play a part in the process of the emergence of their thinking. Will the 200 kids I worked with remember me 20 years from now? Perhaps not. Will 10 of them remember me? Perhaps they will. And that by itself is a phenomenal process-based success. But when one iterates the idea of the importance of process, then children internalize this idea when they deal with challenges in day-to-day life, in social spaces, in civic spaces, in market spaces, in family spaces, and so on, where they're able to negotiate the challenges in a more effective way. This is the most important issue, that our hopes are more process-based rather than outcome-based. Some of us have a problem with the word discipline or disciplining because it suggests that children need to be disciplined, and it suggests therefore a certain basic or an intrinsic lack in childhood. And as behavioral scientists, we have a problem with that construction. Even the word positive discipline or positive disciplining is a problem, and therefore in terms of its semantic and ideological appropriateness, we use the word positive engagement. And I think therefore that if the spirit of engagement, and this is what the psychologist Vygotsky speaks of, and he says that the classroom is a collaborative community. So knowledge is constructed as a joint activity. And it is true that education has been appropriated by corporate houses for market-driven, competition-driven economies. And somewhere along the line, compassion has been substituted by competition, with all the attendant tensions and pressures that children go through. But I think that there is a distinct shift that has occurred in the last 5 to 10 years because of great activism in the field of education and education bodies. And I think that we are in a state of a very exciting flux. And in the next 2 to 3 years, I think the truth will emerge as to which way we really swing. To me, any interaction with children contributes to my emerging identity as a person whose professional life has entirely been dedicated to working with children and for children. And I see every interaction with a group of children as creating an opportunity for transformations to take place. Not just in the children, but even in my own ideas and in my own methods. And therefore, every moment has its intrinsic and primary richness that cannot be compared with anything in the past or with any other institution. It has its inherent intrinsic and unique beauty and legitimacy. And if one captures that, it's reflective of the true spirit of any child intervention, which is based on the spirit of authenticity and the formation of what is called as a true collaborative alliance. Well, I will certainly remember the animation of the 4 student volunteers who collaborated with me in enriching this session. I will remember the laughter, which I think is an indication of the attention and engagement of the entire group. Because when I go to schools, if I'm greeted with silence, it frightens me. When I go to schools, I need to hear children's laughter, because learning cannot occur in an atmosphere of fear and restriction. Learning can occur only in an atmosphere of freedom and joy.